I've worked a lot of jobs since I turned 18. Warehouse shifts, a stretch on a landscaping crew, 2 years bagging groceries at a store that closed down 2 summers ago. Then for about 5 months, I worked the night shift at an amusement park in Ohio called Wonderland. I'm not going to tell you exactly where it is. If you've driven through central Ohio on one of the smaller state routes, past the kind of town that has one stoplight and a diner that closes at 2 in the afternoon, you might have passed close enough to see the top of a Ferris wheel over the tree line and not thought twice about it. Most people don't think twice about it. That's the whole point. You've probably driven past a place like that yourself. A park that used to be somebody's big idea, faded out over the decades, still limping along on weekend hours and a skeleton crew. You see the gate from the road and think, is that still open? And then you keep driving because there's nowhere to stop and nothing pulling you in. What you wouldn't know, standing on that road, is that underneath the ticket prices and the funnel cake stand and the guy in the mouse costume waving at children, there's a second set of instructions that only a handful of people ever see. A laminated sheet with 6 rules on it. No explanations, no context, just 6 things you don't do ever, no matter what. I want to tell you what those 6 rules were, and what happened on the nights I found out why they existed. Because there's still a piece of me that wonders what was actually inside that mouse costume. There's still a piece of me that flinches at the sound of a squirrel moving through a quiet yard. And there's still a piece of me that wants to know how long that list of 6 rules has been sitting in a drawer somewhere, getting added to, one employee at a time. 6 months before any of this happened, I was working the line at a parts plant outside Zanesville, stamping brackets for pickup trucks. The plant closed that spring. They gave us 3 weeks' notice and a pamphlet about unemployment benefits, and that was that. My mother had died that January. Cancer, the kind that moves fast once it's found. She had insurance through her job at the school cafeteria, but insurance doesn't cover everything. And by the time she passed, there was a stack of hospital bills on my kitchen table that I didn't know how to make disappear. I kept her cross on a chain around my neck, plain gold, nothing fancy. It was the one thing of hers I wore every day. I was standing in line at the unemployment office that June, filling out the same form I'd filled out 3 times already, when a guy named Earl Tanner, who used to work with my dad years back, tapped me on the shoulder and asked if I'd ever thought about theme park work. I told him I hadn't, mostly because Ohio doesn't have a lot of theme parks hearing in the summer for anything above minimum wage. Earl said this one was different. He said his nephew had done a season on the night crew at a place called Wonderland, out past a little town called Milner Creek, and the nephew came home every night with cash in an envelope, more cash than made sense for cleaning up a theme park after hours. Earl didn't know exactly what the work involved. He just knew his nephew didn't talk about it much and didn't go back for a second season. I drove out there 2 days later. Wonderland sat off a county road behind a stretch of dead cornfield, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. The main gate still had its old sign up, faded cartoon characters painted across an arch nobody had touched up in years. Past the gate, I could see the top of a roller coaster and a Ferris wheel standing still against the sky. I didn't go in through the main gate. Earl told me to drive around to the side lot, where there was a construction trailer set up next to the employee parking. That's where I met Gerald Voss. Voss was maybe 60, heavyset, wearing a polo shirt with the Wonderland logo stitched over the pocket. He didn't ask me many questions. He asked if I had reliable transportation, if I was comfortable working alone for long stretches, and if I had any objection to signing a waiver. The waiver ran 4 pages. Most of it was standard liability language, the kind you'd expect from any job involving machinery and moving parts. But one paragraph near the bottom of page 3 stood out. It said employment on the night crew involved exposure to hazards beyond what's typical for amusement park employment, and that by signing, I acknowledged this and wouldn't hold the park responsible. I asked Voss what that meant. It means the night shift runs different from the day shift, he said. Wade will tell you what you need to know. The pay was $45 an hour, cash, paid out at the end of every shift. Where I was standing in my life at that point, 6 months out from my mother's funeral with a stack of unpaid bills and no factory job to go back to. That number made the strange paragraph on page 3 easy enough to ignore. I signed. Wade Prout was waiting for me inside the trailer's back office. He looked to be somewhere in his late 50s, built solid through the shoulders, gray hair cut close to his scalp. He shook my hand once, firm, and didn't smile. 10 at night to 5:30 in the morning, he said. 6 nights a week. Gates lock automatic at 10, don't unlock again until 5:30. Security reasons. You need to leave early for any reason, you radio me first. No exceptions. Then he handed me a laminated sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges, the plastic peeling up in one corner. 6 rules, numbered, no explanation attached to any of them. I read through it twice while Wade watched me. Why cats and dogs? I asked him, pointing at Rule 3, and not rabbits or something. The sheet's not open for discussion, he said. Memorize it before your first shift. The rules exist because people already learn the hard way what happens when they're not followed. What do you mean by that? Some things don't need explaining twice, he said. Sooner you stop asking why and start doing what the sheet says, the safer you'll be. That same afternoon, I met Colton Reyes, hired the same week I was. Colton was 22, wiry, with the kind of easy confidence that made him talk before he thought. He'd already read the rule sheet and figured the whole thing was a hazing ritual, something the older staff cooked up to mess with new hires. Always seat loved ones next to each other, he said, doing a mocking version of Wade's flat voice. Oh, spooky. This place used to be a fairground before it was a theme park. I bet half these rules came from some drunk maintenance guy in the 80s who thought it'd be funny. I didn't know enough yet to argue with him. Part of me agreed. I also met Priya Malhotra that day, who worked the ticket booth on day shift and had been at Wonderland almost 2 years. She was friendly in a guarded way, the way people get when they've learned not to promise things they can't back up. When I mentioned I'd been hired for the night crew, her smile faded a little. Just be careful out there, she said. Careful how? Night shift's different, she said, and left it at that. Before I left the trailer, Wade told me one more thing, almost like an afterthought. He said Wonderland had been built in 1971 on land that used to host a traveling fair back in the 20s, and that the fair burned down one night in a way nobody ever fully explained, killing several people who couldn't get out in time. He said the county records on it were thin, and most people in Milner Creek didn't know the history at all anymore. What's that got to do with the rules? I asked. I don't know for certain, he said, and that was the only time in 5 months I ever heard him admit to not knowing something. That night before my first shift, Wade gathered me and Colton in the break room behind the arcade building and read the 6 rules out loud, one at a time, in the same flat voice he used for everything. Rule 1. Always seat loved ones next to each other. This applies specifically at Widow's Run. Rule 2. Always stand behind the glass when operating damnation drop. Rule 3. You're only permitted in the cat and dog areas of Ghost Animal Park. The deer section, the bird section, and especially the squirrel section are off limits at all times. Rule 4. Never wear anything religious, a cross, a rosary, anything like that, anywhere near the demons, the vampires, or the banshee. Rule 5. Never accept a wish from Marty Mouse. Rule 6. Always leave a can of soda for the Reaper before your shift ends. Colton laughed through most of it. I didn't. I couldn't tell you why, except that something about the way Wade said each rule flat, without a single joke in it, made the whole thing feel heavier than it had any right to. Wade folded the sheet and told us to be at the east gate at 10 sharp. Then he walked out, and Colton and I stood in a break room that smelled like old carpet and bug spray, waiting for our first night to start. Widow's Run sat near the back corner of the park, an old dark ride built into a long wooden building painted to look like a train depot from another century. During the day, it ran a mellow loop, slow-moving cars gliding past painted scenes, and a few animatronics that had seen better decades. It was the kind of ride parents put their younger kids on when they needed 15 minutes to sit down somewhere. A faded plaque near the entrance told the story behind it. A woman in the 1800s had lost her husband when a freight train derailed on tracks that used to run through that stretch of land. She was said to walk those tracks every night afterward, waiting for a train that never came back with him on it. Most guests read the plaque, smiled, and moved on to the next ride. I worked Widow's Run for the first time on my third night. Wade paired me with a day shift operator named Sal Rieger for a late maintenance test run, checking cars and track sensors before the ride's early close for repainting. Sal was maybe 50, had worked various rides at Wonderland for over a decade, and didn't ask questions about the rule sheet. He just did his job and left when his shift ended. 2 nights later, on a Friday when Wonderland stayed open until 11 for a summer weekend schedule, I ran Widow's Run solo for the last hour before close. A family came through the line around 10:30, a mother, a father, and 2 kids, a boy who looked about 7, and a girl who looked about 5. Their last name was Henderson, printed on the wristbands the front gate used for family groups riding together. The ride used an electronic seating system, a small handheld scanner that logged which riders sat in which car based on their wristband codes, mostly so the park could track ride counts and safety compliance. I scanned the Hendersons through as they boarded, 2 cars back to back, parents in the front car, kids in the second. Except when I checked the scanner readout before sending the cars forward. It showed the boy's wristband registered in the front car with his parents, and the girl's wristband registered 3 cars back, alone. I looked up at the boarding platform. The girl was sitting right where I'd seen her get on, in the second car next to her brother, both kids buckled under the same restraint bar. The scanner was wrong. It had to be wrong. I've thought about that moment a lot since then. I could have shrugged it off as a glitch and sent the ride forward. Sal probably would have. Most operators would have, because the wristband scanner threw errors all the time, mislabeling groups, dropping signals, and Wonderland's equipment was old enough that nobody batted an eye at a bad reading. But Wade's rule was sitting in my head. Always seat loved ones next to each other. This applies specifically at Widow's Run. I held the dispatch button and told the family there was a quick technical check I needed to run, nothing to worry about. The father looked annoyed. The mother just nodded and told the kids to sit still. I walked the length of the platform and rescanned each wristband by hand, one at a time, standing right next to each car. When I got to the girl's wristband, the scanner beeped once, then showed the same result. Car 3, not car 2 where she was actually sitting. While I stood there staring at the readout, the lights lining the inside of the ride tunnel, visible through the open loading doors, flickered out of rhythm once, then twice, a stutter that didn't match the building's normal light cycle. And from somewhere past the first turn in the track, past where the ride disappeared into the dark, I heard something that sounded almost like a breath being let out, slow and long. The wooden building could settle in the evening heat, but the night was warm and still, and there was no reason for anything in there to be settling. I didn't think too hard about the sound. I moved the girl and her brother so the scanner and my own eyes agreed, both kids now in the front car with their parents, second car left empty behind them. I rescanned. This time all 4 wristbands read correctly, everyone grouped together. I sent the ride forward. It completed its loop without incident. The Hendersons came out 15 minutes later, kids laughing about the part with the ghost conductor animatronic, no idea anything had been off. I clocked their exit on the scanner and didn't tell them a thing. Wade found me at the end of that shift, near the employee lot, waiting on his truck to warm up before he headed home. I told him what happened, the mismatched scanner, the flickering lights, the sound. He didn't act surprised, he just nodded once. "You did it right," he said. "What would have happened if I hadn't fixed the seating before dispatch?" He looked at me for a moment, deciding how much was worth saying. "A few years back, before you started, a family went through with a seating mismatch nobody caught in time," he said. "When the ride came back around, one seat that should have held a person came back with the restraint bar locked down over nothing. Empty. Latched so tight 2 mechanics couldn't get it open with a crowbar the next morning." He didn't tell me what had happened to whoever should have been sitting there. I didn't ask. "Follow the rule," he said, "and you won't need to find out." Damnation Drop stood near the front of the park, a freefall tower painted matte black with streaks of dull red running up the sides, paint applied to look like old blood stains from years back. During the day, it ran the same as any drop tower, riders strapped into a gondola that climbed the tower slowly, hung at the top for a few seconds, then dropped before the brakes caught near the bottom. The operator booth sat at the base of the tower, a small room with a control panel, and a wall of reinforced glass separating the operator from the loading platform and the tower's lower mechanism. Wade had been specific about the glass the first time he walked me through the ride. Stand behind it anytime the ride cycle was active, no matter what. The only exception was a scheduled maintenance window when the ride itself was fully powered down. About 10 days after the Widow's Run incident, Wade scheduled a night maintenance check on Damnation Drop, a routine inspection of the brake sensors that Wonderland ran every few weeks. He paired me with Colton for it, since by then Colton had finished his initial training and Wade wanted him getting hands-on experience with the bigger rides. The check started normal enough. Colton ran the diagnostic sequence from the control panel while I logged sensor readings on a clipboard, both of us behind the glass the whole time, same as the rules said. About 20 minutes in, the panel threw an error code neither of us recognized, a flashing amber warning that read brake sensor fault, followed by a second line reading manual reset required. Colton pulled up the maintenance manual on the booth's old desktop computer and found the procedure. It called for someone to manually reset a lever located on the tower's base mechanism, outside the booth, out past the glass, on the loading platform itself. "We should radio Wade first," I said. "He's clear on the other side of the park," Colton said. 20 minutes to get back to us. This is a 2-second job. Flip the lever, done." He tapped the manual with 2 fingers. That glass rules obviously about the actual ride cycle, not a powered-down maintenance reset. Wade's probably exaggerating the whole thing to keep new guys scared and compliant. I didn't have a good argument against that at the time. The lift motor wasn't running. The gondola sat at ground level, not moving. Nothing about the situation looked like an active ride cycle. Colton stepped out through the booth side door before I could stop him, walked to the base of the tower, and crouched next to the reset lever, half hidden behind a metal panel. That was when the diagnostic screen behind me changed. A standard 30-minute automated test cycle. One Wonderland system ran on all major rides regardless of manual overrides, ticked down to 0 on the display, and the panel read cycle resuming. I didn't understand the full mechanics of it then, and I'm still not sure I do now. But somehow the automated test cycle and Colton's manual reset attempt hit at the same moment, and the tower's systems woke up. The gondola's restraint bars, empty, cycled open and shut once on their own with a loud metallic bang. The lift motor kicked in with a whine that climbed fast. And the reset lever Colton had his hand on suddenly had current running through the panel behind it, the whole housing giving off a low electrical hum that hadn't been there 2 seconds earlier. Colton froze, hands still on the lever, staring at it like he couldn't process what was happening. I was already moving. I hit the emergency stop with one hand and pushed through the booth's side door with the other, and I don't remember deciding to run. I remember being across the platform and grabbing Colton by the back of his shirt collar and hauling him backward, both of us stumbling toward the glass door. The lift motor cut out the instant my hand hit the emergency stop, but not before the tower let out one long groan of metal under sudden strain, a sound that didn't belong to any part of the ride's normal operation, low and drawn out, coming from somewhere inside the tower shaft itself. We got back through the booth door and I slammed it shut behind us. Through the glass, I watched the reset panel where Colton's hand had been. For a few seconds, frost formed across the metal surface, spreading fast, though the night was 80-some degrees and nothing else near it showed any sign of cold at all. The frost was gone within a minute. The tower sat still, powered down, the diagnostic screen showing the test cycle had aborted and logged an error. Colton didn't say anything for a while. When Wade got back to the booth 10 minutes later, having heard the emergency stop alarm on his radio, Colton told him there had been a system glitch during the routine check, nothing more. Wade didn't push for detail, though he looked at both of us a beat longer than usual before writing it up in his log. Later that night in the break room, Colton lit a cigarette with a lighter that took him 3 tries to work, his hand not steady. "Wind must have knocked something loose in the housing," he said. I didn't say anything. There'd been no wind that night. The air outside hadn't moved once. "You gonna take the rules more seriously now?" I asked him. "Probably," he said, and laughed the way people laugh when they're trying to convince themselves of something. Neither of us brought it up again after that. Ghost Animal Park sat on the north side of Wonderland, a small petting zoo attraction that had been part of the park since it opened in the 70s. During the day, guests could walk through fenced enclosures holding a handful of dogs and cats available for supervised petting, along with separate sections for deer, birds, and a squirrel enclosure that had been closed to the public for as long as Wade could remember. Its gate chained shut with a faded sign reading exhibit closed for renovation. Wade told me once, during a slow stretch on patrol, that the ghost part of the name started as a marketing gimmick in the 90s, when the park leaned into a Halloween season promotion, claiming the animal exhibits were haunted by pets that had passed through Wonderland over the decades. For a long time it really was just that, cheap fog machines and recorded sound effects piped through hidden speakers. Then, sometime before Wade's own hearing, the park went through a rough stretch, closed for almost 2 full seasons in the early 80s over money problems. During that closure, the animal enclosures sat neglected. Squirrels, drawn by unattended feed and gaps in the old fencing, moved into the abandoned sections in large numbers. Several died over those 2 years, mostly from electrocution, chewing through wiring that ran beneath the enclosure floors to power old heat lamps and speaker systems nobody had bothered to shut off. Wade said by the time the park reopened, staff started noticing the squirrel enclosure behaved wrong. Not dangerous exactly at first, just wrong. The animals moved in unison in ways squirrels don't normally move. They went still for long stretches, then all activated at once, as though something else was operating them. The cat and dog sections never showed any of that. Wade said whatever had happened to the squirrels, the dogs and cats stayed unaffected, calm, ordinary animals that liked company same as any pet would. That's why the rule marked those 2 sections as safe. The deer and bird sections sat somewhere in between, not calm, not confirmed dangerous either, areas nobody on staff wanted to test. The squirrel section was different. Wade wouldn't say exactly what had happened to make the rule as absolute as it was. He only said that, whatever the reason, nobody working at Wonderland went past that chained gate ever for any purpose. About 2 weeks after the incident at Damnation dropped, on a Tuesday night with lighter than usual patrol duties, Wade split the park into 2 zones for the nightly walkthrough, a practice he used regularly to cover more ground faster. He took the west side, covering Widow's Run and the main midway. He assigned me the east side, covering the arcade building and the maintenance shed near Hollow End. He assigned Colton the north side, which included Ghost Animal Park. I want to be clear, this wasn't unusual. We split patrol zones most nights. Nobody thought twice about sending one person to walk past a closed animal exhibit as part of a routine round. Colton and I crossed paths near the arcade around midnight, both of us on our normal loop. He had his phone out, filming himself walking along the outer fence line of the animal park, narrating in the voice people use when they think they're being funny for an audience that isn't there yet. "What are you doing?" I asked him. "Getting proof for my own channel that the whole squirrel thing is nothing," he said. "Some content about working a haunted job that turns out to be fake. I figure a quick video peeking over the fence gets me some easy views once I've got enough footage from the whole summer." "Don't go past the fence line," I said. "You remember what the rule says." "I'm not gonna touch anything," he said. "Just get a shot of the enclosure from outside the chain link. That'll be enough to prove the whole rules theater." I had my own zone to finish. I told him again to stay outside the fence, and he said sure, yeah, no problem, in the tone people use when they've already decided not to listen. I finished my round of the arcade building about 20 minutes later and was walking back toward the East Gate checkpoint when my radio crackled with Colton's voice, low, half laughing. "You gotta see this. They're just sitting here, not moving at all. Kind of sad looking at them, honestly." I keyed my radio. "Back away from the fence right now." There was a pause, then his voice again, closer to the mic this time. "It's weird, none of them are even twitching. Dozens of them just frozen in place, like a photograph." Then the radio picked up a sound I didn't understand at first, a rustling that grew louder fast, too fast, like wind moving through dry leaves, except there was no wind and no leaves anywhere near that enclosure. Then Colton's voice again, no longer joking, saying my name, saying it twice fast. I ran. The north side of the park was maybe 90 seconds away at a full sprint, and I don't remember most of those 90 seconds except the sound of my own boots on the pavement and Wade's voice cutting into the radio somewhere in the middle of it, asking what was happening, telling me he was on his way. When I reached the squirrel enclosure, the gate was still chained shut, exactly the way it always was. Colton wasn't at the gate. He was inside the enclosure itself, which meant at some point in the last few minutes he'd climbed over rather than gone through the locked entrance. The chain link fence stood maybe 7 feet tall. I could see him near the center of the enclosure floor, and I could see that the ground around him, which should have been mostly bare dirt and scattered leaves, was moving, a dense mass of small gray bodies covering him from his knees up, climbing, all of it happening in near total silence except for a high, thin chittering sound that came from everywhere at once. I grabbed the fence and started climbing. Wade reached the gate maybe 10 seconds behind me, already working the chain loose with a bolt cutter he must have grabbed from the maintenance shed on his way. "Get back," he shouted at me. "Going over the fence won't help." I didn't listen. I got one leg over the top before Wade reached up and hauled me back down by the belt, hard enough that I hit the ground on the outside of the enclosure and had the wind knocked out of me. By the time Wade got the chain cut and the gate open, maybe 30 seconds later, the enclosure floor had gone still again. Every squirrel that had been moving was gone, vanished into the brush and burrows lining the enclosure's edges, the ground bare and quiet, as though nothing had happened there at all. Colton was on the ground, near the center of the enclosure. Wade told me to stay at the gate. I didn't listen to that either, and I won't describe here what the enclosure floor looked like when I got close enough to see, except to say there was no question, none at all, that Colton was gone, and that whatever had happened to him had happened fast, faster than either of us could have covered that distance even running the second his radio call started. Wade got me back outside the fence. He was calm in a way that didn't match what we'd just seen. moving with the steady focus of someone who'd done this exact set of motions before. He radioed Gerald Voss directly rather than calling 911, and Voss picked up on the second ring at nearly 1 in the morning, wide awake, like he'd been waiting for the call. Voss arrived within 20 minutes, driving a car I hadn't seen before, and he and Wade spoke quietly near the maintenance shed while I sat on the curb outside the arcade building, unable to make myself move much further than that. I heard pieces of it. Voss saying he'd handle the paperwork and the call to the family himself, that he'd done this before and knew exactly what to say, that the story would be an accident involving the enclosure fencing giving way, plausible enough that nobody outside Wonderland would ask further questions. I heard him ask Wade if I was going to be a problem, and I heard Wade say no, that I understood how things worked here now. The police did come, eventually, close to 3 in the morning, and I answered a short set of questions from a tired county deputy who wrote down almost exactly what Voss had already decided the story would be: an accidental fence collapse, wild animal exposure, a tragic loss. Nobody asked me anything that required more than a few words. Nobody seemed surprised by any of it, the way people are usually surprised by something like this. Wade drove me home himself that morning instead of letting me get in my own car, because my hands wouldn't stop shaking enough to trust myself on the road. Before he dropped me off, sitting outside my apartment with the engine still running, he told me something. "From here on out, you'll understand something about this job that Colton never let himself understand," he said. "The rules aren't there to scare us. They're the only reason any of us get to go home at all." Hollow End sat at the far southern edge of Wonderland, a themed section built sometime in the early 90s to cash in on the haunted house attraction boom a lot of regional parks leaned into during that decade. During the day, it was a string of cheaply built facade buildings, a fake graveyard, a boarded-up chapel front, plywood tombstones painted to look like stone, the kind of low-budget spook alley most people walked through once for the novelty and never bothered with again. Wade had pulled me aside about it during my first week, before I had any real sense of what the rules meant in practice. He told me that after dark, 3 things occupied that section that weren't part of any daytime attraction design. He called them the demons, the vampires, and the banshee, and when I asked him to describe what any of that actually looked like, he told me he'd never gotten close enough to get a good look, and that getting a good look wasn't something I should be trying to do either. What he did tell me, clearly more than once, was that none of the 3 could stand to be near anything religious. Not because it hurt them as far as he understood it, but because it seemed to read to them as some kind of challenge, an insult, something that provoked rather than protected. He told me to make sure I never wore my mother's cross, or anything like it, anywhere near that section of the park, and to tuck it under my shirt or take it off entirely before starting my rounds there each night. I'd followed that instruction without any trouble for the first 3 weeks. It became routine the same way locking the ticket booth or checking the ride logs became routine, something I did without thinking much about it. About a week after Colton died, that changed. I wasn't sleeping well in that stretch. I kept replaying the sound his voice made over the radio, and I kept thinking about the fact that I'd told him not to go near the fence and he'd gone anyway. And some nights I lay awake wondering if I could have said something different that would have actually stopped him. My mother's death was 6 months behind me by then, and losing Colton dragged all of that grief back up alongside the new grief, until most of what filled my head during my shifts was some tangled version of both. I was walking my usual round through Hollow End on a Thursday night, going through the motions without much attention on any of it, when I realized partway down the fake graveyard path that I could feel the chain of my mother's necklace resting against my collarbone, outside my shirt. I don't know exactly when it had slipped free. My hand must have gone to it without me noticing, pulling it loose from under my collar without registering what I'd done. The first thing I noticed was the temperature. It dropped fast, the kind of drop you feel before your mind catches up to what's happening. and my breath came out in front of me as a thin, visible cloud, despite the fact that it was the middle of July and had been 80-some degrees just minutes earlier on the midway. Then the lights strung along the fake graveyard fence, meant to flicker on a preset loop for atmosphere during the day's operating hours but left dark at night, came on all at once, casting a dim orange light that bent and stretched in a way electric light doesn't normally bend and stretch. I heard the sound next, distant at first, a low rising wail that didn't sound like wind and didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard, closer to something a person might make if they were crying and screaming at the same time, far off but growing closer with each passing second. My hand went to my chest without me deciding to move it, and I felt the metal of the cross, ice cold against my palm, colder than anything around it had any reason to be. I understood all at once what I'd done. I pulled the chain up over my head in one motion, not bothering to unclasp it, and shoved it deep into my front pocket, both hands shaking hard enough that I nearly dropped it in the dirt path instead. The wailing sound cut off mid-note, the way a recording stops when someone pulls the plug rather than the way a real voice would trail away. The orange lights along the fence died at the same instant, plunging the path back into the dark it had been in moments before. The cold in my chest let go all at once, replaced by the ordinary heavy heat of a July night in Ohio. I stood there a long time before I trusted my legs enough to keep walking. I didn't radio Wade about it that night. I told him at the start of my next shift, standing in the break room over a cup of bad coffee, and when I did, he listened without interrupting. "You caught it in time," he said. "That's the only part of the job that actually matters. Has anyone not caught it in time?" He was quiet for a moment, long enough that I thought he wasn't going to answer. "There was a groundskeeper, years before you," he said. "Wore a rosary out of habit and forgot to take it off one night trimming the hedges near Hollow End. We found the hedge trimmers the next morning, still running, lying in the grass. He didn't tell me what had happened to the groundskeeper. I didn't ask. Marty Mouse had been Wonderland's mascot since the park opened in 1971, a costumed character in oversized white gloves and a cheerful painted grin who appeared at the front gate each morning to greet families and posed for photos throughout the day near the Central Plaza. During operating hours, the role was filled by whichever day shift employee had drawn the short straw for the week, a hot, uncomfortable job nobody fought over. Wade told me during my first week that the costume was kept locked in a storage closet behind the gift shop after closing each night, and that under no circumstances was any night shift employee to open that closet. He said the character sometimes appeared on the midway after hours regardless, moving on its own, and that whatever operated it during those hours wasn't a person in a suit. He wouldn't describe it beyond that. When I pushed him on what happened if you encountered it, he told me the rule was simple enough that it didn't need elaboration. Never accept a wish from Marty Mouse. He said the character would sometimes offer, holding out something small, and that whatever I did, I wasn't to take it. I'd gone almost 4 weeks without seeing Marty Mouse outside of daylight hours, long enough that some small part of me started to wonder if that particular rule was more caution than reality. The way I'd once assumed about all 6 of them before Widow's Run proved me wrong. That changed on a Sunday night, about 10 days after the incident at Hollow End. I was crossing the Central Plaza a little after 2 in the morning, on my way to check the arcade building's back entrance, when I saw a figure standing near the closed fountain at the plaza's center, motionless, facing away from me. It was Marty Mouse, full costume, the same cheerful painted face I'd seen 100 times during daylight hours, posed for photographs with kids on his shoulders, waving at cars pulling into the parking lot, standing alone in the dark at 2 in the morning, facing a fountain that had been turned off for years. I stopped walking. I didn't call out. I remembered Wade's rule and started backing toward the path that would let me route around the plaza instead of through it. The figure turned to face me before I'd gotten more than a few steps away. It didn't walk toward me. It simply turned, smooth and unhurried, the big white-gloved hands coming up together in front of its chest, holding a small white envelope between them, the kind you'd use for a greeting card. I stood still. I didn't know what else to do. Running felt like it might provoke something I didn't understand the rules of, and walking closer felt worse. Then it spoke, and the voice that came out of that costume was my mother's voice, exact in a way that made my chest go tight before my mind caught up with what was happening. Not a rough imitation, not close, exact down to the small rasp she'd picked up in her last year from the chemo, down to the way she always said my name with the emphasis slightly on the second syllable, a habit nobody else in my life had ever shared. "Danny," it said, "I'm so proud of you for taking care of things, for keeping the bills from piling up worse than they already have." A pause, and then, "I have something that can make all of it disappear. Every hospital bill, every collection call, gone if you just come take the envelope from my hand." I stood there in that plaza for what felt like a long time, though it was probably only a handful of seconds. Some part of me, the part still raw from 6 months of grief, wanted badly to believe that voice was real, that some fragment of my mother had found a way to reach me and help me one more time the way she always had when she was alive. But I'd heard her voice for 26 years before she died, and I noticed, standing there, a small wrongness in the rhythm of it, a pause for breath in a place she never would have paused, a gap that didn't belong to any version of her I'd ever known. "No," I told it. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "I'm not taking anything from you." I turned and started walking away, back the way I'd come, toward the lit path near the arcade building. Behind me, the voice dropped my mother's cadence entirely, sliding without transition into a long, rising tone that didn't resemble anything close to human speech, high and thin and stretched out, cutting off all at once the way a radio does when it loses signal. I didn't look back. I kept walking until I reached the arcade building, and I stood inside its doorway a long moment before my legs would carry me any further. I didn't radio Wade that night either. I finished the rest of my shift on autopilot, checking boxes on my patrol log without much memory afterward of what I'd actually inspected. And when Wade asked at the end of shift if everything had gone fine, I told him yes, because I didn't yet have words for what had happened, and because some part of me needed to sit with it alone before I could hand it to anyone else. I told him 2 nights later, once I'd turned it over enough times in my head to say it out loud without my voice shaking. He listened the same way he always listened, without interrupting, and when I finished, he didn't offer comfort exactly, but he told me something that stuck with me more than anything else he ever said. "The wishes are never really about the thing they claim to offer," he said. "They're about finding whatever a person wants most and using it as a door. The only way to survive Rule 5 is knowing ahead of time that no door offered by that thing leads anywhere you actually want to go. Have you ever been offered one?" "Everyone on the night crew eventually is," he said. He didn't say what his had offered him, and I didn't ask. Rule 6 was different from the other 5 in a way that took me most of my 5 months at Wonderland to fully understand. It didn't ask anyone to avoid anything or stay behind a barrier or refuse an offer. It asked for something to be given. "Always leave a can of soda for the Reaper before your shift ends." Wade had shown me the spot during my first week, a wooden bench near Gate C, the smaller employee exit on the park's east side, plain and unremarkable, the kind of bench you'd walk past 100 times without noticing. He told me that every night, before the main gates opened at 5:30, whoever was closing needed to set an unopened can of soda on that bench, any brand, and that in 5 years working the night shift, he'd never once seen anyone skip it, because nobody who understood what the other 5 rules meant needed convincing to bother with the 6th. He wouldn't tell me exactly why the ritual existed or who the Reaper actually was, beyond the plain meaning of the word. He said it was the one rule nobody argued with, because it didn't cost anything except 30 seconds and the price of a can of soda. Everybody eventually owes something to death, he told me once. Wonderland's just more honest about collecting on it than most places are. I performed the ritual myself for the first time about 3 weeks after I started, on a night that had otherwise been quiet. By then, I'd already lived through the seating mismatch at Widow's Run and the malfunction at Damnation Drop, though Colton's death and the incidents at Hollow Inn and the plaza were all still ahead of me, still unknown, waiting in nights I hadn't gotten to yet. That first night, my mind was elsewhere, tired after a long shift, thinking about the drive home and whether I'd make it in time to sleep before the afternoon heat made my apartment unbearable. I nearly walked past Gate C without remembering the can of soda in my backpack, and it was only Wade's voice over the radio, calm and unhurried, reminding me I had about 4 minutes left before the automatic gate release that snapped me back to it. I set the can down on the bench, unopened, straightened it so the label faced outward the way Wade had shown me, though I never learned if that detail actually mattered or if it was just his own habit passed down to me. Standing there that first time, I didn't think much beyond getting the task done and getting home. It was only much later, after everything that happened with Colton and the necklace and the plaza, that the ritual started to mean something different to me. By the time I performed it on the night after the incident with Marty Mouse, weeks later, I understood it the way Wade had always understood it. At Wonderland, nothing was owed automatically. Not safety, not distance, not even the ordinary right to walk through a workplace without something asking a price of you. Everything required a small act of respect, paid consistently, without complaint, and Rule 6 was simply the most honest version of that arrangement, since it didn't pretend to protect you from anything. It just asked you to remember that something was owed and to pay it before you left. I set the can down that night, label facing out, and stood there a moment longer than usual, thinking about Colton, thinking about my mother, thinking about how strange it was that a place built to sell cotton candy and roller coaster tickets had somehow become the one part of my life where I understood, clearly and without argument, exactly what was expected of me. The gate released at 5:30. I stepped through onto the gravel employee lot, the sky starting to lighten at the edges, and glanced back the way I always did. The bench was empty. The can was gone, same as it always was by morning, no wrapper, no residue, nothing left behind to explain where it had gone. I never once saw it happen. I only ever saw the before and the after. I want to tell you the 6 rules were the whole story, that once I understood them, Wonderland became a place I could work safely for as long as I wanted. I can't tell you that because it wouldn't be true, and I've tried, through all of this, not to tell you anything that wasn't true. What I can tell you is that I finished out that first season. I'm still there now, working the same shift, same hours, same 6 rules, though I've stopped thinking of them as strange the way I did that first week. They're just the terms of the job. Same as any other job, has terms most people never think to question. A few weeks after the incident with Marty Mouse, Wade showed me something I hadn't seen before. A metal box he kept locked in the bottom drawer of the trailer office, full of old employee identification badges, dozens of them, some going back decades based on the faded photographs and outdated uniform designs. A handful of the badges had small handwritten notes clipped to them, initials and dates, and a couple had something else written in the corner, a short code Wade wouldn't explain, followed by the name of a different park in another state. Does that mean Wonderland's not the only place like this? I asked him. He told me he honestly didn't know for certain, that the notes had been there before he started, and he'd never confirmed what they meant, but that he'd heard rumors over the years, from other night crew workers who passed through, about a handful of run-down parks scattered across the country that seemed to run on the same kind of arrangement Wonderland did. Old places, barely hanging on, always hearing for the night shift, always paying more than the work should reasonably pay. I don't know if that's true. I haven't tried to find out, and I'm not sure I want to. Priya still works day shift at the ticket booth, and we still talk most mornings when our shifts overlap by 20 minutes at the gate change. She's never asked me exactly what happens after dark, and I've never told her. I think she has her own reasons for not wanting the details, same as most of Milner Creek has never bothered asking why the county records on a 1920s fairground fire stay so thin, or why a park that should have closed for good decades ago is still standing. If you're watching this because you found it after a night shift somewhere similar, at some other run-down park or warehouse or roadside attraction that pays a little too well and explains a little too little, I'm not going to tell you to quit. I needed that job as much as anyone needs the thing that's keeping their bills paid, and I understand better than most people why someone stays somewhere, even after they know exactly what it costs. I'll tell you this much. If you ever get handed a list of rules with no explanation attached to any of them, don't waste your time asking why. Wade was right about that from the very first day. The why doesn't keep you safe. Only the doing does. I'm still here, still standing behind the glass at Damnation Drop when it runs its cycle, still checking wristband scanners twice at Widow's Run, still keeping my mother's cross tucked under my collar every single night before I walk anywhere near Hollow Inn. Believe that or don't, it makes no difference to me, but I'm still here to tell it, which is more than I can say for some people who worked that job before me. Milner Creek is a quiet town most of the year. If you ever find yourself driving through it after dark, past a faded arch with cartoon characters painted across it, and you happen to hear something moving in a patch of grass near the tree line, small and quick, going still the second you look directly at it, keep driving. Don't stop the car. Don't roll down the window to get a better look. Some things at Wonderland, Ohio, are worth every bit of the fear people feel walking past that gate. Just keep that window rolled up and keep driving.